The recording started. Smissmas, Christmas, December begins, Halloween ends. And that means Crimbus time. Holiday, fun, that sort of thing. Let's play Whatville. Maybe, hope not, hate it. Okay.
Probably.
Yes.
Out of all the maps, it is the one getting all the attention.
Everyone hates to love Whatville. Ah, Whatville.
Technically, if this is Whatville, then that means that everyone here is a what.
Oh my god.
That means they're all Grinches.
That makes sense. Also, if I sound a little off, I got the sniffles. I don't think I'm sick or anything. I think my body has just decided not to cooperate with me today. Wants me to KFC deep fry myself.
Don't worry, it's deep frying itself.
It's just fantastic. I love being vaguely, only slightly sick. Not enough to actually debilitate me, but just enough to annoy me.
That makes me curious. What do you think is the worst fate? Like a fate worse than death?
A fate worse than death? Fortnite.
Oh, well, that's an easy answer. Did you just get put on the other team? Okay, you didn't, thank goodness.
A fate worse than death. This is gonna sound edgy as fuck, but life? Or to suffer the experience of dying but being alive. So, for example, if you were afflicted with cancer, and the experience of cancer is worse than dying because of cancer.
I mean, there's a lot of illnesses that are just debilitating as fuck, so that could be said about a lot of things.
Exactly. That's why I tried to make it as vague as possible. The idea of the suffering that leads to mortality is what I mean.
Okay, so you're just saying life in itself, if any suffering that life bestows upon you is a fate worse than death, because death is a release.
Because dying intrinsically is just, kind of a... Do not call me cutie ever again! Don't you dare! Ungodly! You are ungodly!
Oh, thank you. That's the first compliment I've received today. I feel so special.
Shut.
I'm not Germa.
But yes, death is in a way a release. But what I mean is, because I want to convey this properly, considering it is actually a very heavy subject, but the idea of a drawn-out death is worse than a normal death.
That is true. I can agree with that.
To die of old age is to be expected, and to die by surprise is to, well, not really suffer through. But learning you have a fatal disease and then going through that process, there's a lot of dread and pain that comes with that, more so than just dying.
Is that immortality is what's worse. You're immortal, but you're not immune. And you don't have a kill switch.
That entirely depends on the type of immortality we're talking about. Because there is agelessness, there is deathlessness, there is indestructibility.
Right.
There was one time that I had the stomach flu, and I know exactly what you're talking about. I was literally just like, oh, I am in so much debilitating pain and agony. Like, I'm still conscious. I just want to be unconscious. Like, why can't I be given the sweet release?
To experience dying is worse than death. And I don't mean that in the edgy, life is meaningless. But I mean that in the way that, pain sucks. Pain just sucks. Experiencing pain is not fun.
There's a weird phenomena that I've experienced. I'm not gonna give it a name other than pain tolerance or mental conditioning, but there have been times where I realized that you can kind of mentally control how much pain affects you physically and emotionally just by like thinking about it in a different sense. Because like obviously if you're not thinking about it, just the experience is enough to shock you, and you're just gonna be like, oh fuck, I'm in pain. This is awful.
True enough. And
but I've just been like, oh, I'm not gonna. This pain isn't that bad. It can't kill me. I'm gonna be all right. And sometimes when I keep that thought in my head, pain actually kind of like it dulls a bit.
I believe
it becomes slightly more bearable.
I believe it's the idea of fixation, because when you're thinking about a particular subject. Or doing something and thinking about something else, the perception of time or the perception of those feelings is lessened. Things go by faster and things are easier to manage when, you aren't really thinking about how much they sting or how long it's taking. Thus, the concept of time is dampened. It is genuinely dampened. At least to you, while it continues to tick on for everyone else. And it also works inversely.
Off of the subject of the mortal coil, we are just trashing the enemy team right now.
Oh yeah, we're showing them our moves.
Show your moves!
Show them your move!
When I was young, I didn't understand what Captain Falcon was saying when he would say Falcon Punch, and I thought he was saying Quelcome Punch.
Quelcome Punch!
Quelcome!
Quelcome!
I blame the Japanese voice actor. Listen, it's just the same shit as Felstellation.
I've gotten a lot of humor out of non-native, language hack. Yeah. What you say?
What did you say to me?
There was a interesting phenomena that me and Chibi were talking about, where we kind of realized, like, oh, out there in the world right now is a child who is like a white human white child, and they get adopted by a human Asian family in China, and they get raised Chinese, and their first language is Chinese, and all that happens. And then that person, like, they have a Chinese accent, they speak in that manner, and then they learn English, and they have a very strong Chinese accent. And then they, like, come talk to other Americans or English speakers, and then they get called racist because of their accent. And the fact that they're white.
That's kind of sad.
It's like it is such a shooting yourself in the foot kind of situation.
Shooting your kid in the foot.
Hey, I got the highest kill streak.
Nice.
But yeah, that's a real. I can't name anyone, but that is likely just because of chance. That is a reality for someone out there.
Right.
Hugs everyone in the server that wants to be hugged. Who is this fucking...
Thank you, Windcrow. That's very nice of you. You're sharing the love with everybody. That is some good Christmas cheer.
Ah, that's not the other team. The other team, doofus. Doobus.
Oh, fuck. Now I feel like a major dumbus.
You fucking goobus. Dum-dum.
Yeah, your DNA and your geography can cause things that Elon Musk is an African American.
Technically, yes. Weird to think about. He is South African American, I think. I think that's the word for it.
Yeah. Yes, but I still, at the end of the day, calling those people African is a bit of a stretch because it's just like, oh, they don't have ancestry from Africa. They have ancestry from another place that established themselves in Africa.
Well, oftentimes the word African is used to associate simply with people of that particular color of skin and that range of genetics, when in reality they could be a ton of things. They could be native to French. They could be born in America and on those cultures there. They could be British. They could be British.
That cracks me up because that reminds me of how, like, there was just like a guy who I think he was just like he was like I think he was like a black guy from the UK, and someone was like, oh, he's African British, and then someone was like, no, don't say that shit. He's African American. Get it right. It's like, no.
He's just British. He is just British. Just call it. Let's just call it American and call it British. And when we want to get specific, I don't know. I don't know about that part. We specify. Or maybe the specification is the problem. Maybe we're too fucking specific and people keep using the words wrong.
Yeah, that too. Lost in translation.
Very well be the issue. Using words for the wrong things. Like, people nowadays use the word communism to refer to anything they don't like.
Right.
That is a huge problem. They use a bunch of isms that they don't really understand to vilify something that usually goes against what they like.
It's kind of a funny situation. Like, a lot of the problems in the world usually, like, the people can be like, oh, it was the culture they were raised in. It was the life that, like, they were, like, the class they were raised in. It was their parents. But then you go all the way back to, like, the root of things, and it's like at the end of the day, it's the education system. It's informing people and having them understand is the root of the problem. And when you're not informed and you don't understand, that's where ignorance grows, and that's where becoming a stupid person happens.
Well, education is a part of culture in a way. The system of education promotes what sort of ideas get fed to the population, be them on a more grand scale or on a smaller scale. So, having a very shoddy education system is about on par as having a super biased education system, whether that be to a specific political party, a specific race, or a specific religion.
And we run into a lot of problems when people's hearts are in the right place, but they're dumb. Like, they're ignorantly woke.
No, yeah. It's when you put too many eggs in one basket and you don't have the nuance to actually back it up.
Well, and this is why I say you could call a person from South Africa and North America African American, because are you going to tell me that some from India isn't Asian?
I mean, technically that is true because they are in Asia.
That is a little bit of a complicated subject because depending on who is involved with this, you also split up. You also split up continents very weirdly. For example, the continent of Eurasia has both Europe and Asia, but because they are landlocked with one another on the same continent, what identifies it as the thing other than borders that are arbitrarily drawn?
Yeah, that's true.
I think there's a problem with putting everybody under a continental umbrella for the sake of trying to be PC, trying to be woke. It's like, if you're going to say it's the entire continent, you need to be ready for that definition. You know what I mean?
I don't think they're doing it to try and be woke. I think they're just doing it because people have different concepts of how to categorize things. Some people categorize it by the social borders. Other people are far more specific and categorize things like... I'm trying to think of an example. But there are... South and North Carolina. Why are they two different things? Why are there South and Northern versions of what is effectively two places that are in the same.
Why can't we have
space.
Greater Carolina?
Why can't there just be one Carolina? They're called the Carolinas in some colloquial places, so why
Just
not
like
just
the
adopt?
Dakotas.
It is an arbitrary line that's drawn both in social boundaries and, like, geographically. And
I never say this Carolinian. I say you're north or you're south.
yeah, and what I'm getting at is people just tend to draw lines differently, depending on how they want to see things. So people who draw the line at the continent rather than more like states, provinces, and stuff like that, they are more interested in getting things as broad as possible. And that's usually because they have a very geographic sense of perception.
What I'm saying about some of these people is I know what they mean, but they're wrong.
I suppose.
I know when they say Asian, but if you're from India, you are from Asia. You are Asian. I know what they mean when they say it, but they're wrong to say that these others aren't Asian. You know?
When I suppose there are also certain social things where certain groups of people don't want to be categorized with other groups of people that they have historically had conflict with. So the boundary of being specifically called Indian would help to draw that line instead of grouping them in with the group that they are very different from socially.
I think what I'm saying is we need to stop it with the large umbrella groupings. All because we were afraid to use some other words that were not inherently offensive or racist. There's nothing wrong with saying this person is black. They're not necessarily from Africa.
Right. It's a different categorization based around the concept.
I mean, you can be from like Jamaica or I don't know, like some other country.
You can be Jamaican. You can be, I think, South American. Is Jamaica a part of South America or is it part of Central America?
No, Jamaica is, from what I understand, and no, I was gonna sound ignorant. I gotta stop myself from talking.
I am ignorant.
If you're looking at continents, it's just North America and South America, but we do have this whole classification of Central America as a reason.
And they are very different culturally from the rest of, like, you know, the continents.
Mostly because of Spain and Portugal.
Right. I suppose
they left their mark.
Yeah, not all of the invaders were confused. South America's two main languages are Portuguese and Spanish. Those come from the Mediterranean.
I suppose what needs to be specified when talking about specific people is you need to specify origin point, whether you're talking about origin point and culture or just the semantics of color, I guess, because when referring to how people are treated in America, it's usually racist people will treat you based off of the arbitrary hues of your skin, but people who are nationalist or otherwise will be far more specific and will have a grievance with where you originate. I believe there are certain, like, I guess, provinces in Africa that really don't like one another, and that is kind of a nationalist boundary. I think.
What did you order?
I think we should do it by the country, because we easily say someone is Spanish, or French, or German, or English. I hardly ever say this European gentleman.
Right.
I think we need to respect the individual countries and stop it with the continental umbrellas, is what I'm saying.
I think here's the if people want to be woke, or not offend anybody, I think the real thing they should do is just ask others how they want to be referred to as.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm gonna say no. He is right. That is better than anything I've said because first and foremost, don't ask people what they want.
We assume all the time. People assume.
I think there needs to be a stronger sentimentality, I guess. I guess that's the term. When interacting with other people, you need to have a stronger sense of sentimentality. And in a situation where you are passing someone by, going about your day, and just generally working, you may not have the time to ask a person what they want to be called and that sort of thing. So you have to make those surface levels assumptions. But if you have any intention of talking to them on a longer term scale or more in depth, you have to be specific on where they come from or things like pronouns. Because someone can look feminine, but they could wish to be called otherwise. And it's only respectful to follow that. Any excuse to try and call them anything other than, he, she, or they, whatever they want to go by, seems weird. If someone that is masculine asks you to call them a she, what's the problem with respecting that individual's identification?
Yeah. I believe someone should be respected until they do something to lose that respect.
Agree.
It's that simple. Like, if someone just asks you to do something, there's nothing holding you back from just doing it, because it's like, oh, what are you just rude? Or do you understand that there is like a level of respect that you treat every human being before like they betray that respect? Like, I know some people act like, oh, well, then that just means you're a pushover. And it's like, no, it means you're respectful. That's what it means to be respectful.
I actually got an argument from someone that was effectively like, okay, well, what matters most is what am I supposed to tell the police when they go out looking for you if you go missing? And my response was, use the phrases masculine, feminine, and androgynous, because the idea that, oh, she was blank blank blank, or he was blank blank blank, is fine, I guess, but also it's super unspecific, because there are plenty of ladies that are built with shoulders like a barn, and there are plenty of men who are super dainty, and that is just like a fact of it. So it would be more valuable to refer to them in like police descriptions and stuff like that for finding a missing person by saying feminine, masculine, and other specifications, instead of trying to argue for why you shouldn't use their pronouns in that sense of the word. Just like, what harm is saying masculine and feminine and stuff like that?
Well, that spy gunned you down.
Oh yeah, mean guy, complete morale destruction.
I mean,
God, he got a crit on me.
It's like we need to ask people what they want. On the other hand, how often do we get that chance? I saw you from a distance, and I need to describe a crime scene.
Right.
It's not like they talk. But at the same time, it's like, well, anything we say without knowing is we are pushing our terms. We are pushing our descriptors. We are pushing our ideas of who woke or PC or not being threat or anything. We're pushing our perceptions and labels upon someone. But then we don't know the choice. So then what do we do? So maybe what we need to do is stop worrying so much about labels, myself included. And I'm talking globally, not just with
Right. I do think the idea of labels is very arbitrary, I suppose, is the term of that. We think about labels all the time in first world countries because, I mean, we have the time to do it. We aren't thinking about the dangers of the day or the risks of survival. We usually have those amenities satisfied. So we have plenty of time to mull over prospects like, oh,
Thank you.
what do we want to be called? Or what do we wish to become?
Yeah. And I think with all this, I propose a few global rules. One, you can choose your own labels. Two, you cannot choose anyone else's labels. Three, if you do choose and have preferences, people
Uber
are
for do it.
no, people
Shit.
are allowed to get it wrong. They're allowed to get it wrong.
I think that's important. We should be allowed to get it wrong a couple of times. Let's say that someone is transitioning. They used to be he, and now they're she. They're friend for a long time, while wanting to respect those positions, those pronouns, may mess up a few times just because of how accustomed they are to seeing that person as a he.
Yeah, nobody is perfect, but I think there's a difference between misgendering or mislabeling someone out of ignorance and out of malice.
Right.
Right.
Consistent, I suppose, violations of mispronouncing an individual, even after being specifically told what their pronouns are.
Yeah, flagrant disrespect.
Because I'm in a situation where I know someone who was born a man and they're on the woman path, but I've only ever known her as a female. It's easy for me to keep that straight. But I know someone else, born female on the male trail. I knew this person was female the whole life. It's harder to get it right.
And that we should just be allowed to mess up a few times, because we'll never learn what's right and wrong without, whiffing it a couple of times.
Mistakes will be made. Nobody is perfect. You learn from your mistakes.
Now, let's not go applying that to criminal acts. I do believe there should be hard set rules for society. You can't just go killing someone and then say, "Whoopsie doopsie, didn't mean to do that. I promise I won't do it again." I'm
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's morbid. But there's this. I recently learned about this story. It's an old story about this kid who, back in like 2007, he was a teenager who, normally, like in his entire life, or up to that point, he was a pretty good person. He like went to school, had friends, had like decent grades. He also went to a church and like had parents that were like, they were kind, practicing Christians. And one day he got injured in some sort of incident. It wasn't any sort of intentions or maliceful injury. It just happened because of a mistake, and that forced him to have to be essentially stuck in his house for about a year or so. And while he was recovering, he chose to spend that time on the TV and doing stuff like watching shows and playing video games, which he originally didn't do as much because he was much more physically active outside of that. But for some reason, the time that he spent like gaming got him like addicted, like genuinely addicted, and it was to specifically the first two Halo games, which he played a lot of. But when Halo 3 came out, he was really, really fucking like he was dead set. He was the deepest into his obsession that he was possible. And his Christian father saw him enjoying a violent video game and was like, no, not in my household. And so he would have to go to his friend's house to play Halo. And that it all culminated when Halo 3 came out. He saved up his own money and bought the $60 video game and tried to hide it from his father so he could play it in secret at the household. And his father found it, scolded him, and confiscated the game, and then proceeded to lock it away in his like little lockbox safe that also had his 9mm pistol in it. And the kid just got really mad and kind of was like, "Oh, fuck you, Dad. I don't like you." And after some time passed, it seemed like he genuinely was okay with what had happened and was coming to terms with it. But it was just a farce, because after that happened, something inside him snapped, and he just decided he was going to murder both his parents.
Ah.
And like a week later, he just found, and like he went into his dad's room, found the keys to the lockbox, opened it up, and then just stole the game and the handgun, and then tried to execute both of his parents. He successfully like shot both of them. His mother died, but his father miraculously survived a headshot, which is ridiculous. And it ended in him like being found out by his sister, and he ran away from home. And he now acts, he tried to play it off like his father committed a murder-suicide, but that wasn't the case. And in the end, he got convicted and basically got life in prison. And his father survived and fully recovered and actually fucking forgave him. And now he genuinely believes his son feels remorseful for what he did.
That is a tough thing. I don't think you can just go and shoot both of your parents over a video game. But also, this is really a consequence of reclusion. Things like suppression, and other, I suppose, abuses of power to prevent one from experiencing things.
And so this was in the early 2000s, so this was fresh off of the 90s hate wave of video game, like boomer video game hate, where they were just going to like claim all video games were work of the devil, all video games made you violent and irrational, all video games were addictive and problematic. And like after that, they literally, his defense attorneys during the trial literally made the defensive claim that he went insane from video games, and that he genuinely believed that in reality, when someone dies, they just respawn like in Halo.
Nah.
Oh God, they're the people that thought that rock music would literally open a physical portal to hell.
That's dumb and stupid and
I
dumb.
know, it's like the worst defense I've ever heard. But the defense at the time, because of the climate, actually got him a lighter sentence. It gave him a chance for parole in his future.
That's stinky. That's stinky.
No, yeah, it's big stinky. When I heard that, I was like, wow, how ignorant can you get?
But you're right. That's the way people thought, so it worked. And
Yep.
enough people did. It forces people to go, wait a minute, maybe our reasoning isn't that sane. Like, yeah, the shit you're saying is the devil made me do it, and people are getting away with stuff. So rethink the kind of garbage you're saying.
It's the idea of choosing to go back on your word or doubling down. You can either admit hypocrisy or continue to indulge yourself in
That
it.
soldier has no idea how bad he fucked this team.
It's like, yeah, it causes a balance. And speaking of balance, I do needed to add to what I said before about, people are allowed to get it wrong a few times, but then those people need to be aware of the rule. People are allowed to correct you, and you need to adhere to that.
Yeah, I mean, conversation and the spreading of ideas
one,
are
Sniper.
two-way streets. Like,
Right.
you should be allowed to get it wrong sometimes, but you should also be accepting of when you do. You should accept when you are corrected. Of course,
And
there is the exemption of someone overcorrecting and all that stuff, but that's usually not the norm.
Well, those are the people that need to remember that they're allowed to be wrong. That other people are allowed to get it wrong, and you don't have to snap at them. Excuse me, it's ma'am. You could be nicer, right? They're allowed to be wrong. But then that person needs to be like, man, fuck that. And I was like, I'm sorry, ma'am. They both, don't be a dick. Will Wheaton said it. Don't be a dick to each other.
That's
There's
all
one
it
rule. Don't
takes.
be a
Just be nice. Just be a little nicer. That's all it takes. Just
but allowed to be wrong and allowed to be corrected. That is so parallel. I mean, that is freedom of speech. You're allowed to say whatever, sure, and people are allowed to respond to that. You're allowed to be criticized for what you said.
Sorry, but I manually dominated someone as a medic.
manually dominated someone.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I got the kill myself. I didn't just do that by mooching off of someone's kills. I did it myself.
Man, we just love the ramble about weird conversations, don't we? We started off on like we started off on how, you know, cultures get separated and all that sort of stuff. And then we started talking about the fucking Halo killer, apparently. Winkrill. Mm. All right.
I think any and everything we could say ends up coming back to be reasonable, be nice.
Yeah. Now.
Over Stoville.
Now, finding a new match.
That's all right.
But I suppose that can also be countered with what is reasonable, what is sensible. You have to set a standard for what those things are. And
enter dogma.
Correct. Now, I don't want to talk about that subject too much because it is all based off of perspective and ideals and that sort of thing. But for me personally, I think that reasonable is to be consistent. If things are repeatable and understandable, and you have a train of thought that goes from point to point instead of teleporting all over the place, that is reasonable. And I suppose what classifies as moral, like objectives and stuff like that, just try to avoid hurting as many people as possible, both emotionally and physically. If you have to value one over the other, don't hurt people physically if you have to pick. But usually you shouldn't have to.
Right. But then everybody's idea of what is reasonable, because I know some people who are consistent, and they are consistently horrible people. They're consistent bigots.
That is true. Consistent line of thought can also be segued into bad trains of thought.
Yeah. Because yesterday, today, and forever mentality, it's consistent, it is loyal, but it oftentimes thinks that its mistreatment of people is a good thing.
You are correct. So
guys,
well, I suppose you have to mix both reason and morality together. So, for me, it is to be to be reasonable and moral is to be consistent and to avoid as much harm for others emotionally and physically as possible.
And then people who say that you thinking different from me hurts me, and it's like, how do you defend yourself against that ghost chasing ideology of,
I suppose
you think differently, it hurts my soul.
I suppose now we're getting into a category of quantifying pain.
Kind of reminds me of a video I saw recently of a Karen flipping out at someone because that person, they were taking someone's parking spot in front of their house because they had their like motorcycle parked in that spot, and they didn't want to admit that that motorcycle was a licensed vehicle that had the right to be considered a vehicle, and also was like admitted into the DMV, so like it was legal. And she got mad about it and was like, "Oh, you filmed my car," and she tried to act like the woman who was filming her touched her car or somehow damaged it, when all she did was film her having her fucking rampage. And then she obviously uploaded the footage of the woman like making an absolute fool of herself to the internet, and she then sent the weird lady, like the Karen, sent a formal apology to her. Two formal apologies. One that was more straightforward an apology, and the other one was kind of fishing for pity or sympathy because they're like, "Oh, I don't want to be humiliated online," and then immediately 100% backtracked a day later, like, "Oh, do you know what like defamation is? Well, you're gonna find out in the court of law." And it's like, dude, you just acted like an idiot on camera, and you're acting like someone assaulted you.
People can be a little goofy sometimes.
Can't change them, but we can't eradicate them because that's also wrong. What do you do?
Yeah. Give them the chance to humiliate themselves. That's my opinion.
I didn't even consider the word eradication. That's quite extreme.
That's what I'm saying. It's like the world would be better without a lot of these mentalities and things. But you can't act upon that, so what do you do if you can't reason with the unreasonable people? But it's wrong to just,
honestly,
I don't know, cleanse them off the earth.
I'm gonna be honest. Sometimes the problem solves itself because either the person is so good at humiliating themselves, so good at being like obviously an idiot and an asshole. You don't really have to do much. Like the person kind of takes care of themselves as a problem.
I think that the idea of eradicating bad ideas is... I don't think it's reasonable.
I don't think it's possible.
I think that it is a bad idea to remove bad ideas because that kind of creates a think tank where we don't really understand what a good idea is. And
right. Utopias don't brainstorm.
Utopias are stagnant and perfect, and that can be interpreted in dystopian ways. But ultimately, these people with bad ideas, usually they are a unifying force. If a particular bad group, I'll call them, was to form and gain traction as they brew up bad ideas, the greater majority would decide, hey, no, don't do that, stinky, wrong, bad, stop it. And then everyone else would agree. But if those bad ideas never formed, then it would kind of be a situation where we just don't really understand what the opposite of it is.
Yeah. So then it becomes, what's the follow-up to the rules I stated of people are allowed to be wrong, people are allowed to correct you, and then what if after that people still want to be douchebags? It's like, then what do you do? Can you do anything? Should you do anything?
I think it, like I said earlier, and kind of leading off of what Alabaster said, if someone crosses the line for everybody eventually, everyone gets tired of their shit, and then people do something about it. It's either everyone is unified against them, or they do something that crosses the line and they get in trouble for it. And it's like, well, you kind of, like the saying goes, you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes.
You should be allowed to be wrong. You should be allowed to correct people when they are wrong. And for those who opt to continue doing the wrong thing after being corrected, they should suffer some degree of consequences depending on what the definition of wrong is here. Because the definition of being wrong by being a racist is different from being wrong in mathematics or that sort of thing.
Right. That's just...
if you
I mean, when I think that,
sorry.
I'm sorry. It's just when he's talking about people correcting it en masse, it just makes me think of things like the French Revolution and riots.
Yeah, there is a boiling point in society. Sociologists already know that there is a point where the masses get sick and tired of the same dang old treatment all the time, and then a radical change happens.
It's a cyclical kind of power dynamic. It starts off good and well, and then people with bad intentions come into power. A rebellion begins, the status quo changes, and then it happens again.
It is a cycle. The concept of a utopia is a society where that cycle is absent.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. It has no cycle. That's boring.
And it's interesting because it's kind of like just there is sort of the age of tension and peace where everyone is like, oh, I don't like the situation, I want it to change, and it can be progressive, slow, or minuscule at best, and sometimes it just prolongs the inevitable end of that cycle and the resetting of it, but it depends off of the culture, the tolerance of the masses, and just how hard the people on top are willing to push the envelope. Because it can get super egregious really fast, or it can be a drip feeding of disappointment.
But the fact that the cycle is going to happen over and over can be a little disheartening. So then I guess what each individual person has to do is, well, you take care of your part in your cycle. You're not going to change everybody. Do as good as you can within your capabilities and take care of yourself. It sounds a little, auto-survivalistic, but...
I mean, I get it. It's like, do with which... I mean, it literally is... I'm going to be that guy again and quote Lord of the Rings, but Gandalf literally tells you, like... Frodo literally looks up at Gandalf and says, why did the ring come to me? Why does everything suck right now? I don't want this to happen. I just want to go home and live a cozy life. And Gandalf's like, nobody asks for bad shit to happen. But what we can do is do what we can with the time that we have. That's all we can do.
Yeah. Man, I had so many other trains of thought that came up during the conversation, but they've kind of devolved downwards. There's a ton of things that you find yourself wanting to say in the moment, but in the process of other people talking, you just kind of slip out of the train of thought.
Like slipping train.
Yeah.
You want to explain to me why you said slipping train? I don't.
I think I said it just to get that reaction.
Ah, that makes sense.
Slipping Jimmy.
Oh, Slippin' Jimmy. Known for his oily tactics.
Well, my break is over. I hope those thoughts come back to you.
Oh, I have no idea if they will.
All right, I'm gonna do something else. I'm Alabaster. I'm going to finally, I don't know, I'm gonna put in. I don't know what I'm saying.
I don't know. You're trying to find a subject to talk about, I think.
No, I know what I'm going to talk about. I'm just trying to put a way of wording it. I'm going to finally make you sick and tired of Lord of the Rings.
Okay. Well, you've done
Let's
it.
talk about it.
Okay, fine. What do you want to talk about in terms of Lord of the Rings, eh?
I guess it kind of calls back to what we were talking about earlier, kind of like the cycle of change and frustration and disappointment. But the Lord of the Rings universe has a cycle, well, not a cycle, but a motif of diminishment, that all things must come to an end, and a new age must come to replace it, or something must come in to supplant what was once normal.
Okay, so
what do you think about that?
I like the idea that in a cycle there is progressive change, meaning that things will never be the same, only similar.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of shown in the that motif is mostly expressed in most of the magical aspects of the world of Lord of the Rings are slowly going away. Like the elves, the dwarves are all just like the dwarves are dying off. Their numbers are not as great. Their kingdoms are not as plentiful. The elves literally all just leave, and eventually it's just humans and maybe a handful of hobbits. But we know that hobbits are just humans, like a diet Pepsi, diet human.
Diet human. Little guy.
Yeah, little guy. So it is essentially like that is the case, that like the magic is gone. The wizards all leave or all die. We literally don't know what happens to Radagast. That's a mystery I like, though. That's something that's like ripe for fan fiction.
Oh yeah.
Oh, make a whole ass adventure.
Personally, my thoughts on Lord of the Rings are, it is the core of fantasy, but I like it, but I don't like it enough to be a super big fan of it. It's nice. It's got a lot of tropes. It's got a lot of funs. It's pretty cool, but also I like the Elder Scrolls way more.
Well, I get that. Elder Scrolls takes aspects of that, but also, well, the freaking creator of the Elder Scrolls lore is a cracked out man, and I adore him too. So I'm not gonna disagree with that. I think it's just because the writers are two very different people.
I think what I like about fantasy is distance. I prefer fantasies to be extremely distant from reality. And Lord of the Rings is effectively a medieval world with light fantastical elements. There are fantasy races and there is magic, but it's still swordsmanship, bows, and most of the creatures are relatively mundane. I think it's pretty good as a transitionary between high fantasy and medieval just kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like the most extreme, like, because it's the interesting thing about the Lord of the Rings universe is it starts out a high fantasy and kind of leads into what you just described. Because the when you see the Lord of the Rings universe, that is the state that it has entered after a lot of entropy and a lot of like diminishment, like I described earlier. In the beginning, shit is so extra and so like cool. Like you like the most anime moment that happens during a giant like ultimate battle between dragons, balrogs, gods, elves, and Maiar, all this shit happening. And there's this giant dragon and Celegon the Black that's like unfucking defeatable. He's larger than a mountain range, and you're just like, oh god, how do you defeat that thing? Do you give the gods a big sword? No, give like the bravest motherfucker in the planet a ship made out of glass and mithril, enchant it so that it can fly. Give him a bow that like shoots like giant like silverthorn tipped arrows, and then he flies around and like fights the thing in the epic like final battle of ultimate destiny, and he kills it, and it like falls and collapses on the mountains and damages a portion of a continent, sinking it into the sea. Like that shit, that is high fantasy.
Right. I enjoy. Sorry, go ahead. You
I
go
was
first.
going to say, I know that I myself have also many times said that Tolkien is the basis for modern fantasy, D&D, RPG, and I think generally that's true. But I have to admit that Tolkien is not the only core of fantasy these days.
Yeah, he's not the only one, obviously.
Because of especially the recent rise of the old ones. Lovecraft is a huge influence too.
Oh, I was going to get to that. There's even Lovecraftian influence in Tolkien's writings. I wouldn't say like influence as much as the same kind of concepts. it's such a cool idea Tolkien implemented into his own lore, even though he seldomly used it, and I understand why. It wasn't the main focus of his writings. But he wrote of these creatures that were created the moment the world was brought into existence by the gods. Like, they sang it into existence through a collaborative song. And due to the influence of different gods, different aspects of the song affected how the world developed and how it was made. And like the main antagonist, or the main big baddie, Melkor, he's the one who made all the shitty stuff exist, like pestilence, famine, disease. All of the suffering that we have to endure is because of him, and it's like, okay, that makes sense. A world that would have originally been quite flawless turned out flawed because of that intention. But there was one thing that was intrinsically a part of the world none of the gods even were aware of, or like directly influenced their existence. Just from the power that was being exercised in the creation of the world, beings almost on par with the gods were brought into existence deep within the bowels of the earth, and they were simply called the Nameless Ones. And they were unfathomable eldritch horrors that were faceless, shapeless, formless, but they took shape based off of their own wicked desires and intention. And they just festered and ate upon each other in the darkness, and they, like, very few of them even ever saw the light of day. They just were so intrinsically tied to the depths of the earth. And you only ever get to see one in the entirety of Lord of the Rings, and that is the Watcher in the Water. It's just another one of those horrors that somehow made its way up through the depths that the dwarves dug, and it made its way out into the lake outside Moria. And it in the movie they like make it look like it's like a big old tentacle monster. Oh, how spooky, scary. That feels more just like normal fantasy. But in the book, it is much more unknowable. They never see its face. They never see its body in the book. It is just a mass of tentacles that seem to be endless that come from the lake. And the tentacles have, like, fingers. They're not normal tentacles. They aren't covered in slime. They have, like, a weird leathery skin. It's not natural in any sense of the word, and I love that. It's the little tiny taste, little hint of the high fantasy, like, eldritch darkness that resides in Tolkien's universe. And it has its place. The only other time that it's mentioned is the fact that Gandalf, in his fight with the Balrog, they fell to the very depths of those those dark corners where those nameless beings live. And Gandalf had to describe how when he and the Balrog fought, they fought through countless passages and halls that were created and carved by these beings. And multiple times, him and the Balrog would encounter these beings and have to fight them off together just to continue their duel. And Gandalf said even after being resurrected, he didn't want to remember what he saw.
That is pretty neat. I personally think that an aspect of high fantasy and stuff like that makes it so intriguing is mystique. Magic, in its most expressive form, is nonsense. It is chaos.
It's just making something happen that shouldn't.
It is indescript. And because of that, the high fantasy settings allow for things that are either highly unorthodox or highly unexpected to happen. And I think that is more interesting to me. In Lord of the Rings, it's very explicable, I suppose, because there's not all too much of it. But in something like the Elder Scrolls, magic is a far more abundant and vague concept.
Oh, it is something, that's so tied to the very roots of the world itself.
And that can be intertwined and all over the place. That's why I like so many settings of fiction. And it's not because of the idea of, oh, super powerful, flashy, cool things. It's more just, I like things that are vague enough for me to interject my own material into that space, to come up with ideas that are original to myself. It's basically the precept of fanfiction. I like things that enable me to get creative with it.
Something that is so big enough, in depth enough, and has enough space and breadth that you can influence it, inject a character, inject an idea, and it's not too far-fetched.
Right.
I agree. That is a good, when you know that a fantasy world has that as like an accessible feature of it that you could make and influence like lore and parts of it, and it feels realistic enough, and it's not just like some goofy like power fantasy or self-insert fan fiction. Like it has some really cool implications that like it's a world that obviously rests with only in our minds, but that in itself gives it power.
And it's also one of the reasons why I like communities and games that are easier to mod, because it allows you to warp that fantasy into something that you want, that you would enjoy more and have it more personalized. And yeah, I just like things that are open to interpretation. I want there to be enough concrete things for canon to be a subject. Rules help to breed creativity, but I do want there to be vague enough rules or few enough rules that you can stretch them, bend them, twist them in such a way that you can accomplish your own goals while remaining canon to it. It's more interesting that way.
I agree. It's and like when you say like, oh, you like the Elder Scrolls universe more than Tolkien or Lord of the Rings, I don't blame you at all, because I'm one of those people that autistically perused the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages until I had absorbed a unexpected amount of knowledge. It made me fall in love with it so much more, and it's why I still to this day I look forward to the next edition into that group of games. But I know I'm gonna be like 40 when it happens, so like god dang it, like what am I gonna do?
What are some of the other major influences in modern fantasy we see? I think there's still a good dose of Arthurian legend.
Yeah, that is classic, and it's kind of funny because that actually kind of builds off of what Tolkien did and researched. Because Tolkien, he, as like a historian and like one of those lore buffs of his age, was like, oh, I want to learn as much as I can about folk tales, fantasy, and historical tellings of my culture. And he looked back in time and he found that it had either been expunged or not written down. And what is often attributed to British culture, like Arthurian legend, is actually French and everyone else, and really anyone that isn't British. And he felt kind of like disappointed and upset by that. And he was like, oh, so my entire country and culture has no tales, to tell.
Everything beyond that is chimeric or lost to legend.
Yeah, and it hurt him. It made him feel saddened, and that's why he made Lord of the Rings. It was like a personal passion project for a historian who had already learned the breadth of European lore and then some, and realized, oh hey, I have enough of a comprehensive understanding of fantasy and folk tales that I can just forge my own. And he just spent his entire life doing that.
It's neat. It's cool.
Like that right there, like that's where you can like you talk about Eartha and how much you love it, and it's like you are really just not so different from Tolkien. You are trying to accomplish the same goal. Create a world with your mind that has its own rules and purposes and devices, and you decide how complex that is going to be.
I think another thing that I really enjoy about fantasy games, or at least ones that leave it open-ended, are the ideas of, this is very Eartha, but crafting mechanics. The spell crafting is huge. I would love spell crafting to be added back into the Elder Scrolls. Like, dude, give me the ability to make a spell that fucking summons a bunch of skeletons and then automatically kills them with like a turn undead, so I can level restoration and conjuration at the same time. That'd be fucking dope.
I want to play a manga. I want to play Lily Mothit.
Okay, so I was in the bathroom, right, and I started thinking about like the different races of Tamriel for the Elder Scrolls. What Skyrim does when it comes to applying armor is it actually takes armor and chops them up into a bunch of smaller pieces, and then applies those pieces in sets to different categories of your apparel. And in doing so, it's actually set itself up to be in a position where each of those individual pieces could be their own slot of armor. And I think that it would be so much cooler if the Elder Scrolls made it so that you applied those armor in smaller pieces. Give you more opportunities to enchant those different pieces with specific effects, and though it would tone down the armor rating on individual parts, it would balance it out for each thing. And the idea...
What you just described is how armor is treated in Morrowind, so
I am very aware of that.
Choir.
I am very aware of that, and I wish they had kept it, because you can take that concept and apply it to a bunch of different fantasy races. Let's say that you want to play a Khajiit. Well, what if they're digitigrade? You wouldn't be able to wear the proper foots and stuff like that. It would kind of be difficult to pull off, but in return, you could have advanced jump height or mobility. Let's say they made it so that you could play the Slowed. Well, you'd only be able to wear circlets, masks, and gloves and stuff like that, but you could have super powerful starting health values and magic. Like, imagine starting off with 50 in conjuration and a fuck ton of health, but you just can't wear nearly as much armor as any other races because you're a big boy.
I would like that. So it would make the role-playing aspect much more part of it rather than the generalist. Like, obviously, I know you're a guy who mods his Skyrim, so I know you likely have made it as modular and multifaceted as possible, but vanilla Skyrim, it is so disappointingly generalist for me. Like, the most variety you can get is be a warrior, be a stealthy person, and be a mage, or be a mixture of any of those three things, and that's it. And I'm just like, what if I want to be a guy who doesn't rely on the majority of that? What if I want to be Joe Schmo? What if I want to be, like, there's so many options to that universe that it feels extremely limiting to just say that that's the three ways to play. And I agree with you. I want there to be the Slowed. I want there to be options where it's like, oh, I'm a guy that everybody hates. I'm a guy that can't wear armor but is tanky. I'm a guy who uses magic to, like, fuck around with people. Like, I like to fly through the air with magic. Oh, that was a thing back in the day. Oh my god.
Imagine if you could start off as a particular race and it impacted how your relationships with other, like, factions would be. So if you start off as something like a Dunmer, you would be hated by the equivalent of the Stormcloaks. Or if you started off as perhaps an orc, you'd be hated by pretty much everyone but the orcish bands, who would automatically welcome you. And maybe a side quest availability could be based off of how much you were liked. So, starting off as a hated race means that you have to work harder in the main quest line, or doing things like killing bandits and trading before those side quests open up to you, because people just don't like you yet.
Yeah.
It would be very cool. And playing off of the idea that armor is fractioned into pieces, maybe there could be a single set for each beast race that fills out those missing armor slots.
Yeah, beast armor.
So an armor, like a set of apparel for the Slodes, would just be robes that are, like an enchanted set of robes that are super dedicated to improving different facets of magic, such as destruction or conjuration. Seeing as they don't like restoration and all that hubbub. It would be a perfect way to, after getting those artifacts, becoming a lich, because many Slodes ended up helping Molag Bal and other darker gods.
Hard to find darker gods than Molag Bal.
Yeah, I meant darker gods in the concept of, darker than most other gods, but you get the picture.
Yeah, I get the point. I don't mean to be that guy like, oh, Molag Bal is the worst one.
Now, something that I love that a particular mod has done is called the Armory of Tamriel. And the Armory of Tamriel is a mod that makes it so that you can make pieces of equipment and then apply materials to different stylings. So you could have a glass color palette and stats on Dwemer armor style. And I think that would be really awesome to have in a future Elder Scrolls game.
Styling along with materials.
In the idea...
No, I mean, dude, like,
go ahead.
Cathedral-style stained glass armor?
Like, it would be nice to have modular armor, and then also on top of that, have this variability so you can pick the preferred aesthetic of the different materials that you like.
Alright, we're gonna fuck them up. Let's do it. Go, 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 go!
Ow. Okay.
I mean, just imagine putting an armor that makes you look like a huge, cathedral Rosetta window.
It would be pretty neat. Like, could you imagine getting the dark black and orange of Amber armor, or Madness ore, and then applying that in the style of Dwemer? Or, no, the style of a Dramora's armor set. That'd be sick.
No, I agree. That is extremely fun, because when I already told you this in the past, but my lofty expectations for how the crafting was going to operate in Skyrim, when I heard that crafting was a thing, I was just like, oh, fuck yeah, I'm going to get to, like, use different materials and shape the blade into different ways, and then I'm going to get to make engravings on the blade so I can, like, custom decal it. I can, like, write the word penis on my sword while I kill people with it. And it's like, I don't know, like, something like that. I thought that was going to be in the game, only to be very mildly disappointed that everything was just, you make a thing and then you upgrade it.
I just feel like with the models that they already have now, even if they didn't upgrade them, they could slice the models apart and figure out ways to make it so that equipment is modular. That would be so cool if you could, like, modify each piece of armor in a way that you enjoy. Could you imagine getting, like, feathers and other things to put on the shoulders from hag ravens, or
cool.
giving your gauntlets claws, also from hag ravens? Like, imagine having imagine as well layered armor, so you can wear clothing and light armor and heavier armor at the same time over top of one another. You could have clothing underneath, very simple clothing, and then you could have like a layer of that basically storm cloak light armor, and then on top of that you could have proper plating, and then on your helmet you could wear a hat, which would be hilarious. There's so much you could do with it. I love it. I wish it was prominent. More prominent.
Also, you have almost completed my demo man contract.
Very nice. I got swapped to the other team.
I saw. It was sad because I was Ubering the moment I saw you.
No,
I contributed to your death.
You contributed to my death. How could you? You betrayed me. How dare you?
You dare!
You dare, you foul-fetid thing. Awful, awful person.
but yeah, I feel like there's a lot you could do with the Elder Scrolls when it comes to equipment systems, and I like the idea of craftable magic, such as enchanting. I like the idea of craftable spells. I like the idea of custom-made equipment, because having those sources of diversity makes it so that meta is much harder to obtain, meaning things are far more personalized. If there's no meta in what armor you should wear, you can interchange it as much as you'd like.
Oh, I like the Elder Scrolls universe for how much variety there is in it. Like, I agree. It doesn't, the thing that's like, I don't know if I'm going to offend anybody by saying this, but it's not like World of Warcraft, and that makes me like it more.
I agree. World of Warcraft is very bog standard fantasy, and that's fine.
And it's not just bog standard, it feels like it's trying too hard. Like, I don't know how to put it to words. Like, yeah, there are tons of fantasy races and shit, but it's like, everyone, kind of like with Warhammer, is cranked up to such a level that it's like...
It's merchandisable fantasy.
Yeah, it feels like the fantasy has gained a life of its own outside of it just being a different world.
Are you saying that World of Warcraft is the Big Bang Theory of proving that it's fantasy?
Yes!
That is the way to describe it. Wow.
That is perfect.
Just like the Big Bang is to comedy, that is
what World of Warcraft is to fantasy.
Wow. Now that'll offend endless amounts of people.
Our whole universe was in a hot, dense state.
We need to show the audience that these guys are really smart. How do we do that?
Make them hyper giga nerds! Because all smart people are nerds. I'm dead.
But yeah, the reason why I love the Elder Scrolls universe is it kind of combines my love of, like, you know, having variety in fantasy, but also the fact that, like, there is a lot of, like, the detail to how everyone has had to live in this world together, and how that has so many implications, so much lore, so much history with one another. Like, how the Argonians are just trying to, like, live. Like, yeah, they're scary, and they have, like, a weird biology, but at the end of the day, they're just people. They're just lizard people, and they were created by fucking tree gods that realized they were in a dream, and were just like, oh, cool, I guess I can live here forever.
I love the Argonians. I do. I love
and like, I love the cycle of their lore, especially, like, what's recently been developed in Skyrim. The fact that, like, oh, the Dark Elves found them and were like, oh, these are subhuman creatures. They do not deserve our respect. They're nothing more than animals to be benefit off of. They just enslaved them. They treated them like trash. They didn't even give them any rights. And they just, like, treat them that way for centuries. And then the Red Mountain erupts, destroys the Dark Elven homeland, just covers it in ash and magma, and nobody can use it anymore. And the Argonians' immediate response is like, oh, those assholes who've been oppressing us for centuries just took the massive L, and from nothing but nature.
Looking particularly vulnerable at the moment, Dunmer.
And they just pull a massive vengeance attack on them, and just slaughter the running refugees and remaining armies of Morrowind, and take what was once theirs in a massive swath of irony. And I love that. Like, our Argonians are just sitting pretty in the fourth age of the Elder Scrolls universe. They're just like, damn, we're doing good for ourselves. Oh, everyone out here struggling, Empire failing, like the Aldemary Dominion like dominating. Why do we give a shit? We have our like undefeatable ecosystem that nobody has been able to tame but us because we are biologically attuned to it.
I really want the Slowed back because they were the fat, nihilistic losers of...
The fat bastards.
They were the fat bastards of TES. I want to be a Slowed. Sloweds are so awful, but they make a great jackass of a character.
I just love their lore. They were just like, I'm gonna become the Nurgle of this universe. Proceeds everyone to be like, whoa, you suck. Let's kill you. Like, that's what differentiates Warcraft differentiates Warhammer from Elder Scrolls. When people get to a certain level of bullshit, everyone gets sick of them. Like, everyone just has like a level, like a golden standard of just like, oh, you can be pretty bad and you can get away with some nasty shit, but when it becomes everyone's problem, everyone will stop you. Everyone will band together just to say, stop it, go away.
No one can ever agree on anything in Warhammer, which sucks. But at least everyone can agree that the Slowed needed to die in TES. But
They just agreed.
honestly, I would love to play as a Slowed. Whether it's like a Slowed trying to make amends for the history of his people, or just he's an asshole, like doing the same shit that they always have, just as the protagonist.
Just make Nagasta.
Nagasta.
I love that. I don't know if it would be possible for you because it is so clunky, so unwieldy, but I want to know if you could try to find a way, because I know you can get it for free off of the Elder Scrolls website. I want to see you try to do a Let's Play of Redguard.
That sounds terribly painful, but I'll think about it once.
Because that game has so much funky lore in it and cool moments. Like, you actually get to meet Clavicus Vile and make a deal with him, and you get to outsmart him. Oh, it's like, there's just shit that happens that never happens in the universe.
I want fantasy games to get more fun, you know? I want there to be aspects where people who kick your ass come back for a second round. I want you to be able to make friends and make enemies with everyone. I want you to be able to custom make your own equipment. Like, could you imagine if instead of you getting an artifact from the Daedric Princes, they bestow you with knowledge to get the materials, styles, and then the enchantments associated with their equipment, so you can custom make an artifact based off of those properties?
Oh my god, I love that.
Like, imagine getting the Savior's Hide, right? But instead of getting Savior's Hide, you get like the knowledge to make parts for Savior's Hide for your own pieces of equipment, but you also get the enchantment for it, so you can apply that to other things.
Oh, or you get like the ability to like make like the Huntsman's Spear, which is like the weapon that Hircine wields. Oh my gosh.
Like the Huntsman's Spear's enchantments on a sword. And let's also bring into mind more types of things, like whips, rapiers, things like that.
More variety of weapons. Like Dark Souls and Elden Ring already have that on point.
I want a game dedicated to giving you variety. Variety in companions, variety in equipment. Just randomly generate fucking everything. I want to be able to be whatever I want to be, and I want a game to bring that out. And all it requires is taking a few puzzle pieces and making it so that they can fit in any way we wish. That's all it takes. Because for every puzzle piece, it can be matched with another puzzle piece infinitum. over and over, over and over. And that is what makes a game replayable. And that's what makes a game irreplaceable.
Oh, you're just making me cream dream over the thought of such a perfect fantasy game. Oh.
And I think the fact...
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
So that's a big deal for me in the game is what is the replay value? How many times can I try something different in the next playthrough? That's really important to me.
Oh, why did you just accept your fate?
Because I was trying to block the sentry and I didn't realize it was dead already.
Oh, but speaking of Morrowind, did the Argonians actually occupy Morrowind at any point, or did they just leave it?
They occupied what was livable.
Because I like to think that the Netch were Argonian livestock that escaped and went feral.
I mean, I love the creatures that live in the lands of Morrowind and Mournhold. Like, all that shit is so beautiful.
Like, when did the Netch appear?
Oh, they were just native to Morrowind.
Oh.
Along with things like the Gwar and the Scribs and the I forgot what are the name of those weird like what's the eggs that they all eat? Quama. Yeah, the Quama are so cool. Oh, like literally just a modular species of grub that figured out how to just fulfill all facets of life and became so important to the infrastructure and like society of Morrowind that they protect their hives.
Dude, when you said the core and the scribs, I'm like, sound like you're talking about street gangs.
Yo, are you a part of the Gwar or the Squibs?
Oh shit, Doc, run! No, Doctor, no!
Dude, throwing Scrib signs?
Yo, you fucking throwing Gwar signs? Unforgivable. You're gonna get shot up for being a part of the Scribs.
The Scribs.
Scrib, I'm gonna turn you into Scrib jelly. I'm going to turn you into Scrib jelly.
That sounds like something fucking Zach Cadell would say.
I was about to say that was literally a line.
Oh, I'm a little Scrib, a little tiny Scrib. Huh?
You see, if you wanna imitate Zach Cadell, main thing,
you've got to have a high little voice, and you've got to roll the R's. You've got to roll the R's.
But
I mean, that's how you play little weird, goofy creatures.
My voice is too deep and guttural to.
No, you pull it off. I mean, Zach Cadell's voice isn't any less deep.
Yeah, but he's a doofus. He's a doofus.
He's a doofus, and his voice is so unique and you
can't properly imitate his voice. It is a copyright you cannot steal from Zach Cadell.
Exactly.
What a treasure of a man.
He is a treasure.
Oh my god.
There is a default Pyroland sniper running around, and every time he gets a kill, he taunts.
There's like a group of just people who taunt just present here.
Get back. I'm gonna die.
I just realized this game has gone on forever.
Oh yeah.
AP, what a Jew.
Yo, what the fuck? What the fuck? What did Jeff just fucking say?
Yeah, he suggested that we shave our legs and wear skirts.
No. I don't got skirt legs. Also, skirts are for the Scottish and ladies. I was tempted to say feminine folk, but I didn't know how that would go off.
Hey, that still leaves it open. That's fine.
Open to the Scottish?
No, just
Or all the Scots feminine to you?
Because feminine doesn't imply that they were born with a hoo-ha.
5.
Good point.
It's called.
Morgan.
They like to be called feminine folk. They like to be called feminine folk.
Now, here's a question. I mean, it's probably an easy answer for you, but out of all the races in the, like, I know you like. Okay, besides the Slowed, what is your favorite out of the Elder Scrolls universe?
That's a tough one, but if I had to pick, that is tough. What do we consider race here? Are we talking like the mortal races, or are we also talking Daedra?
Anyone that's playable.
Anyone that's playable. Gonna have to say I sympathize with the orcs very heavily.
They are the rejected people.
Orcs often are seen as stupid. They're often seen as brutish. But they are just generally the outcasts of the world, and I feel for
For the
them.
first 2 games, you weren't even allowed to play them. They were just default enemies. That's how badly treated they were.
That's loathsome. Poor orcs. Poor orcs.
I was gonna
Porks.
say I like the Rakelings because they got cute faces. They're cute.
They're little goblin folk.
Like me want pork.
Playable. I default Khajiit when I play me.
Honestly, the Khajiits are just like
Shit!
they are the furry race. Also, haha, you disguised as me, you dumb dumb.
I thought it was the best disguise, because I'm like, oh, no one's gonna think I'm suspicious as a demo man running around with his melee.
No
the
one's
only
going to
one-
suspect a thing.
I was trying to appear as you just respawning, and the last person I wanted to see me saw me.
That would actually have been very inconspicuous.
It
I
would
have
have been.
I have died a lot. Oh! Oh no, the sentry! Oh no! Oh my goodness! Oh, I'm dead.
My name is Joe.
My name Fred.
Thanks for the heals.
The sentry goes BAP!
Engineer Gaming. Engineer Gaming.
Now here's another question. What's your favorite race in the Lord of the Rings universe?
Orcs.
I thought you were gonna say the Uruks.
Oh, the Uruks. Right. That is their technical name, the Uruks.
The Uruks.
Dwarves are very much a close second because
Yeah.
I myself am a dwarf.
Yeah, they're your kin.
But
I just like the Uruks. I like the Uruks because they're so fun and exciting and other things. If you were able to play Talion in Shadow of War and go around taming the little dwarves that happen to be mucking about, that would be far more interesting than the orcs. But you don't get that. You get the orcs and other things, and I just think they're colourful folk. You know, being green and pale and spooky coloured. I just love the orcs, all that sorts. Orcs are
I like
special
them.
into me hearts.
It's funny because it's like everyone who is I don't know. It's funny because talking about Lord of the Rings now is like a political statement.
what the fuck? What is that supposed to mean?
The fact that like the new like Amazon show that came out, like everyone is so like anally explosive about it. Like either you are a Tolkien mega fan who hates it because it's not how you want it to be, or you are a far right leaning conservative who wants to find something to complain about, and you find out that this is something that's like, oh, well, this is a traditional thing that's being changed, therefore it is bad in all of the ways possible. And like that filled the entire comment section of every trailer, every video, every commentary of this shit with the same Tolkien quote that is misquoted. where they're saying, "Oh, the forces of evil cannot create. They can only distort and change what already exists." They just fucking spam that over and over and over in the comment section, like thousands of these fuckers. It's endless, like a tide. And I'm just over here like, I just wanted more Lord of the Rings content in my life. I don't care. I don't care.
I'm going to say this. If you complain about a character being a different color, you better be complaining because that race's color is pertinent to the character's story and not just because it's different. If an elf is black, stop fucking complaining. If a Nazi is black, then you've got a point. You have a...
At that point, you're kind of like, I guess points for inclusivity.
I get where you're coming from there with your example, but I really have to say, I feel like if you're using a Nazi as just an example, there's just more to complain about there than,
correct. But I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on the fact that if you're complaining about a character's race, it better be super fucking important to what the character is, and not just be because it's different. Because if you're complaining about it being different, you're just looking for an excuse to be a racist dick.
Exactly.
Could you stop complaining about something so fucking arbitrary? And for the people who are celebrating the diversity, bringing attention to the fact that it is different is undermining the idea of bringing diversity and normality to equality. Calling something out for being the first gay Disney character makes it so that all the other ones are unimportant. If you want to normalize something, if you want to normalize people being in particular places, stop bringing attention to it and just subtly implement them. Subtly push away the concept of them not being there. The more you bring attention to it, the more problems that's going to cause. But also, I'm going to bark back at myself, because if you don't bring attention to a problem, then it will never be resolved. So I just needed to point that out to me, so I understand why people do the exact thing I'm complaining about. But also, I'm going to complain about it on the spot, because that was the purpose of me even bringing it up.
But I do think we agree, though. You shouldn't cast Halle Berry as the angry mustache model.
Correct. Also, now that I realize that I have said the N-word, N-A-Z-I, I realize that...
N-word.
I realize that my video is probably going to get age-restricted as a consequence.
Yeah, age-restricted, censored.
Which,
you can't know about that happened.
Can't talk about those... Can't even talk about them being bad. I can't even say, hey, these guys are some motherfuckers, right? I can't even say that.
No, don't mention it, don't mention it, don't mention it. And then you'll be like, why? And it's because then people might think you're supporting them. And it's like, well, then
they're fucking stupid.
So I think what we need to do is we need to write out the Bruno list that you can have in front of you during the stream.
Yeah, right. The Bruno list. Don't talk about Bruno. Don't talk about the N-word.
Don't talk. I'm gonna make a little note and just slap it up on the top of one, like the side of my webcam, and just go like, all right, what can't I say? I can't say the word killing. I can't say N-A-Z-I. I can't say I can't say...
I know what means.
I can't say... I can't say Critler. Critler.
Yeah.
I understand. I understand why they get up. The reason why the bots, the algorithms, get upset at you for saying these things There's not human decision behind it.
For saying Astolfo Crittler.
I understand
Oh,
why.
fuck.
It makes sense. But also, it upsets me that you can't even call them awful, terrible, and shitty. I can't even complain about them existing. It's almost as if they're trying to delete them from history, which would be good if not for the fact that it undermines all the people who fucking died during that time period.
No, exactly. It's a double-edged sword trying to rewrite history because history is a loaded it's a loaded subject. You delete some of it, then that leaves an absence of context for a massive loss of life or a horrifying event.
We need that stuff to be in history, and we need to
Yes.
talk about it so we remind ourselves not to be awful, awful, awful people.
Yeah,
But
we
it-
need the how not to manual.
But if we censor it, we forget what is so bad about it and make the same mistakes again.
Exactly.
Can we just
Yes.
Can we just actually have freedom of speech? Can we actually be able to talk about things instead of being ostracized for focusing on tough subjects? I feel like we should be able to talk about these things because it's healthy. It's healthy to process it. It's healthy to discuss it. Because at the end of the day, discussing things, talking through things, helps us heal. We go to therapy to overcome our mental issues, and that requires conversation, acknowledging there's a problem, and then addressing it verbally.
We got it, guys. GG.
We need some global therapy.
I think the world needs to accept that a lot of the problems are up here and not down here. And I'm pointing to my bicep, not my heart.
I thought you were pointing at your wiener.
Shut up. All right. Well,
I think that is a good place to end it off.
yeah, this is a great place to end the entire stream off. To all the audience who joined, the one person who consistently stays here, thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful evening. Goodbye.
And